Kia ora koutou, ko Douglas Walker, tōku ingoa. It's my pleasure today to reintroduce. Sorry, feedback there, just checking the sound is working. It's my pleasure today to reintroduce Linda and Chanda, who were part of the Level 1 pilot webinar that we ran last year, and to introduce Ange Fox. Ange is with South Westland Area School and has been part of the pilot this is their second year of the pilot as well. And so the panel today is going to focus particularly on the new standard 1.1, so that's the socio-scientific issue, and so we'll hear about how that's been going and what some of the challenges are and what some of the really cool things that have come out of that are. And before we begin, it's important to say that whatever we talk about tonight is the opinions of us as individuals. That doesn't represent the views of any larger body. So kia ora, and thank you for being with us, Linda, Ange and Chanda. If we could start off maybe by taking a turn going around and talking about how we've built this standard into the larger body of learning that's taken place for you this year.
Who's going first?
You are, by the looks of things.
Oh, okay, my turn. So 1.1, the socio-scientific, we're doing this as a one-off this year, but the beauty of this is that we can also do it again a second time for a resit in a different topic because it's skills-based again. So we're just doing a single one-off, but we're giving the kids a choice of use of 1080 to control pests, or should we be able to keep cats as pets when we live in the Waitaki Ranges, or kauri dieback, of course, which is big for us.
Lovely, thank you, Linda. Who's next?
Okay, I'll jump in. So we've got our socio-scientific issue based on a unit similar in some ways to mammals as consumers, the biology standard. So but restricted to humans. So we're looking at the human digestive system and then looking at a disruption to the system. And the disruption we're looking at is diabetes. So our social-scientific issues is diabetes and obesity in our community. As you probably know, so Tangaro College, we're in South Auckland. The rates of these non-communicable diseases are quite high. The kids are quite familiar with it because they're living in homes and in families where diabetes and obesity are highly prevalent. And understanding the science behind it is not always a common thing. And so this addresses socio-scientific in that way. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Chanda.
Kia ora. We down in South Westland, we started the year with this standard, or I wouldn't call it anymore. We started with a unit themed around kaitiakitanga, kind of like your general ecosystems unit, looking at biotic and abiotic factors. And we did our kind of end of topic assessment using the standard, looking at 1080 and how it's used locally, because that's pretty relevant down here. And I'll be reassessing that standard later on next term at this rate, with a chemistry focus instead. So I'm going to do a chemistry unit and then look at our local stream and kind of do a stream study, socio-scientific. Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Ka pai, Ange, thank you. Could you talk about how you've approached the teaching of this learning? Has it been, as we might have dealt with standards in the past, where you teach all of one thing and then assess it, or has it kind of pulled a whole load of strands together? How have you each approached that?
We haven't taught it yet. We're putting it as part of a bigger unit of our local area. Excuse my pronunciation, Taio. And that's a big unit that's going to encompass all the other sorts of assessments. We've got a validity assessment going on alongside an investigation assessment, and then we go straight into the socio-scientific assessment. We are teaching this one through research, really. Basically, it's a student inquiry-led unit. So 3 weeks, get it done type thing.
I sort of got outvoted on this by my department. I sort of wanted to start off with investigating the actual socio-scientific issue and then look at the underlying biology. My department weren't as keen. So what we ran with was looking at the actual biology, the biology of digestion, the biology of diabetes, and then address the issue. So we would sort of do the biology and then address the aspects of the standard, the different perspectives and the kaitiakitanga aspects. Shortly, the kids are going to be writing up their report.
Yeah, we're somewhere in between that. We started off by learning the science behind the issue or around the issue, and then it led into an inquiry style assessment. 3 weeks to get it done, and that all the kids picked their own question or specific aspect of the issue to investigate, and we learnt that as we went. And I'll do something similar for the chemistry topic as well. I think do the chemistry first, then let the kids hone in on an area that interests them, and then do the assessment that way.
And I'd just like to welcome Catherine. Catherine Hunter is our question asker today. And so if you're watching on YouTube and you'd like to type any questions into the chat, we'll have time towards the end where Catherine will sift through those and ask some of those questions to our panel today. So kia ora, Catherine, good to have you with us. You were talking a little bit about kaitiakitanga there, and Mātauranga Māori is a big focus, for a lot of people across the country, and in science, I know that there's a real need for more information on that. Could you talk about how easy it was, or any particular ways in which you incorporated Mātauranga Māori into this standard?
Well, this has got to be the easiest standard for it, because kaitiakitanga is in the specification, so you've got to, it's just part of it. You've got to talk about it, and it is about being aware of the world around you and your place in it, and that's just an integral part of this assessment. It was so easy for this one, really, because you're the kids are living it, they're involved in it. Easy.
So this was a bit of a growth in my understanding of what kaitiakitanga was. I tended to associate it with the environment. Guardianship of the environment is what the definition tends to be. But Māori perspective is that we are also part of that environment. So our health, our haora, and our well-being, and looking after that is also kaitiakitanga. So it does fall in quite nicely with the health-related issue that we are doing. And what we're doing is we're getting kids to think about themselves as kaitiakitanga. Then at the next level, their whānau, the next level, the community, which also includes the school, and then extending it to government level. What's the New Zealand government's responsibility as far as looking after our well-being? And that works really, really nicely. It's actually getting kids to think of some of those social aspects. Kids don't know that hospitals are funded by a government, that kind of stuff. So it's a nice kind of integration. We are looking at the science of aspects, but then, there's this whole sort of social science component as well, which I quite like.
Yeah, we started our topic by breaking down the word kaitiakitanga and talking about what it meant to each kid. Very easy to do in a small class, but and just running with that, we just keep referring back to the word and okay, so how are we demonstrating kaitiakitanga? How are these people that we're looking at demonstrating kaitiakitanga? How are the people around us, what are they doing? So just really honing in on that theme of kaitiakitanga and what it looks like and how it can look different and how everyone wants to look after our environment. And it'll be a different aspect with the chemistry one. And I would love to dip into some more of that whole order. How do we look after ourselves as well? I think that's fantastic. But it was very easy for the standard. It's in there. You just acknowledging this concept as important and getting the kids to discuss why they think it's important. It's good. It's great.
We started with the legend of I can't remember the names have gone, but one where the guy cuts down the kauri tree and the forest animals come and rebuild it every night, and he cuts it down and rebuilds it. Quite a cool little legend, that one. And it's based around being aware of the fact that you've got to look after things. You can't just go in and cut trees down and do stuff like that. And it was kind of a way of making the kids think of themselves as a part of the whole system, like a big web, and the fact that they aren't sitting outside or above the web and looking in and waving their magic wand and making things happen. They're actually within the web, and whatever they do is going to affect the strands of the web and unbalance the system, and we need to keep that system balanced. So that's kind of like the way we're talking about it all the time through it.
And on that note of, I think, Ange, you used the word importance there. The explanatory note for 1.1 talks about, it very clearly defines local, but it might be slightly different to what a lot of us understand local to mean. Could any of you talk about that?
Local's about the kids and what is of interest to them. It's what's for the students. We've got one group of students who are a little more interesting in the classroom than others when they're there. And instead of following the normal course, they've done a different course. And of course, being a group of boys, they're car mad. So we've actually written a different socio-scientific about electric cars and whether they're good for the environment or not, and focusing on batteries. But that's of relevance to them. And
we did something similar. What's relevant to the kids? What do they care about? And then that's local for them.
I guess my understanding of the word is maybe a little bit different. You ask a 15-year-old what interests you, and they're not going to say diabetes and obesity. But what we are finding is that when we have introduced these concepts to the kids, they are engaging. So then relevance is the key thing here. Last year when we did this, I had parent interviews, I think during the time when we were actually doing this unit. And the number, I think about 3 parents tell me that their child has been coming home and talking about their experiences in the classroom. They're talking about diabetes and they're talking to grandma. Have you got type 1? Have you got type 2? Kind of thing. So there's conversations that are stretching from the classroom out into homes. And to me, that's local, that's relevant. And of course, we're also impacting in some way, hopefully, I don't know, in the future health of the students as well. So to me, that makes it local.
Fantastic, thank you. What have the particular challenges been? I mean, you've all run, you've all incorporated this learning into your programs last year and this year. Have there been any changes since last year, and what are the challenges that you've found this year?
You want to take that one, Chanda?
The standard has not changed a great deal, or maybe my memory is a bit foggy. But we have had, excuse me, niggles around the interpretation. And one of the good things this year is we have regular meetings and we're able to nut out some of these. One of the big niggle was the interpretation that perspective means opposing point of views, pro, con on a particular issue. Whereas for level 1, the perspectives can be different perspectives, not necessarily opposing perspectives. And that's something we sort of had to get our heads around a little bit, mainly because we are so bio teachers from doing 2.2 and 3.2. I guess my other niggle is in the explanatory notes, the definition of the word issue. And I think it defines it as issue being something that people have different viewpoints on. And I don't particularly agree with. A scientific issue is something that impacts us as members of society. I don't think anybody has differing viewpoints on whether COVID, well, actually, maybe they do, on COVID. But we do have differing viewpoints or alternate viewpoints on how to address the issue of COVID. I've got to say, our points of views, our ideas are being taken quite seriously by NZQA and MOE, and they are looking at making changes to some of the wording of the standard, some of the things that have tripped us up. They're looking at reviewing that, which is really, really encouraging that our experiences are being useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I found I got tripped up on just how long it takes, how long it can take level 1 kids to get through that kind of inquiry-based, research-based standard. And they do need a fair whack of hand-holding and scaffolding. And with absences from COVID and everything, it just, I feel like I planned too much for this year, and you just run out of time sometimes. So, but this was a standard that was worth taking your time with. So, yeah. But I'm now fully on board with Chanda's interpretation of an issue and the perspectives, and I think the next attempt is going to be 10 times better. And I hope it is tweaked to match our new understanding for next year, because it'll be so much easier for everyone and so much more engaging for the kids too.
Yeah, I mean,
I do like the aspect around science-informed perspective, because I think that's really, really important, So we can't just say vaccines don't work because whatever. It has to be science-backed, science evidence that is informing that particular viewpoint. And I really, really like that aspect.
Yeah, it's been really hard to get your head around the fact that it's not viewpoints, it's about perspectives, and just the perspectives is quite a nuanced thing that's quite hard to get across to level 1 students. But if you can take it as, do you look at the cure, or do you look at the cause of the problem, and which end of the story are you going to actually spend your time on, or which would be better to work on to fix the problem. So it's been fun to get our heads around.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of science teachers, we'd be looking at this new standard and maybe comparing it to one of the the biology socio-scientific issue, perhaps at level 2. But there's quite a marked difference there, isn't there? Could you talk to that? So you're nodding there, Linda. Could you talk to that?
The marked difference is around the viewpoints and the kaitiakitanga approach to those viewpoints, and the fact that science can inform what you do, but you've got to think a bit beyond a straight out science response, because you've got to say why it actually is going to restore balance, for want of a better way of putting it. And the fact that the science responses could be working from 2 different angles. But it's not about this person says this and that person says that, and these ones are right and these ones are not, type of thing, which is what we originally interpreted it as.
Yeah. And so if we applied that, I think you'd used the example, or the example 1080 was raised earlier. How might that look? Traditionally, if we're approaching that, say at level 3, then it's been along the lines of the for and against and explaining the science that's involved. So how might that, if 1080 was the topic, and I think Ange, you talked about using 1080 because it's very relevant where you are, how might that look different then than we've seen it in the past?
I think it will look different in that rather than asking my kids to examine why people are against 1080, instead we'll be focused on 1080 as a potential tool to solve an issue. So it's not that 1080 is the issue anymore. Instead, we'll look at the issue of pests and pest control. And 1080 may be one perspective on a way to deal with it, and an alternative or a different perspective would be trapping. And then hopefully the kids will see that there's room for both or something. So rather than 1080 and the use of 1080 being the issue, we're reframing what the issue is and the impact there. So slight change, but it'll be massive, I think, in how you teach it and how you mark it and what you're asking the kids to do. That's what I think.
We're going to do 1080 in our one as well. For that's an option, and I think we'll look at the fact that 1080. I mean, the science behind this says that 1080 can kill native animals and native birds, but then the other perspective is that if you don't use 1080, then the pests that it's killing are going to kill the animals, native animals and birds. So while 1080 and the animals and birds might kill some of them, the pests will kill them.
Like a risk versus benefit thing, eh?
Yeah.
And so both of those are the differing perspectives, but both of them are science informed.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Chandar, I think I really liked what you were saying earlier on about how your team overruled you on an approach. Could you each maybe take a moment and talk about how you got your teams on board? Sorry, Ange, this might not be as relevant for you. I think you're on your own down there. But maybe Linda and Chandar, if you guys could talk about how you brought your team on board, or perhaps what happened that led to you being overruled as well.
So last year when we ran it, half of our classes did the new standards and half of the classes stuck with the current standards. And I thought, wow, we're going to get some amazing data compare the two systems. COVID put a stop to that as we went into lockdown. But I think, we had two really good terms of running the new standards. And I think just general discussions at our meetings, some of our external results was really, really good. I think that is what convinced the rest of the department to jump on board as well. So this year, our whole cohort, all teachers, all classes are running the new standards. And that is something I've been really, really jealous of with Linda and Green Bay. Having a big pool of people and a big pool of people having input and discussing, and even when things go the wrong way, discussing and sharing ideas. And that's something I did miss a little bit last year. So, not only have people come on board, but they are bringing in their ideas and their, resources and context that we could run things on. So, didn't really have to do a great deal to get people on board, but they are. So.
Fantastic.
For my lot,
thank you, Chandra.
I've got a pretty big team, and everyone was pretty well on board right from the very word go, and we've been working together on it for 2 years now at this stage, because we started midway. Because we're such a big team, we have to start quite a bit earlier. It's a bit more unwieldy, but this year it's been great because we've actually got people. I've got different groups in charge of different standards, so I'm not having to do everything and be in charge of everything, or any, we're working as a team, and the others are just taking leadership roles right throughout, and it's been great because it's spreading the load. It's fantastic. Sorry, Ange.
My team is the other piloteers, and they're great. It was very easy to convince myself to do this.
And something that I am sort of got at the back of my head is, if we do the trial next year and we've got a bigger pool of people, there's going to be a lot of people who haven't had 2 years experience like we have. How is that sharing of ideas? We bounce ideas off each other really, really well. But, how is that going to work with a bigger pool of people? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think we're all really grateful for the sharing of ideas that you guys are doing already. It's really great to hear how you are, a year or two ahead of where some schools will be. And that's helping to inform, our thought processes as well. Were there any contexts that you decided wouldn't work and you'd ruled out? And if so, why?
No, can't really think of anything. Like, as I say, we actually added a context of, electric cars and batteries and stuff for our boys who were car mad. So I think the beauty of this is that it is a skills-based one, so you can fit it in. I mean, we can do it on fluoride, added to water. Should we have the dams in the Waitaki Ranges, the water dams, and there's just so much local stuff around that is of interest to the kids or relevant to the kids. May not be of interest, but it's relevant.
Yeah,
I'm the same.
You go.
I was just going to say the same. Like, there was nothing. I just looked at my units and thought, what would be more fun, investigations or socio-scientific for the end? And that's how I picked. I think you could do anything as a socio-scientific issue.
Yeah, we haven't really discounted any context either, and I think that's probably part of the beauty of these standards, that they can just slot into context that you think would be interesting to kids or relevant to kids. We weren't planning on offering reassessment opportunities, but talking to these guys just yesterday, I'm seriously considering offering reassessment for socio-scientific in our next unit of learning, which will be our physics learning. And again, you can slot it in pretty well, because as Linda says, it's these skills that are on the standard that you're going to be assessing. So yeah, seriously considering reassessment now, guys. Thank you.
Sorry. I think it's good to redo this one too in different contexts, because it's a social issues. The kids should be thinking about them. Although I guess we've got to keep some up our sleeves for level 2 and level 3 too.
And you've been quite enthusiastic about reassessment opportunities, Ange?
Just a bit. Yes, I planned them into my year plan. I just thought, why not? There's only 4 assessments and 2 of them are externally done. Normally in my year I would have a bazillion internals. So this is my way of covering that need to assess, I guess. And maybe in the future I wouldn't even call them formal reassessments. Maybe I will let the kids do multiple attempts at the standard and they select the one to submit for assessment. I don't know. But the reassessment thing seems to be working very well, especially given the nature of things this year. COVID being around, we've had extreme weather on the coast. Just knowing that we've got another attempt up our sleeve, it's great.
Yeah,
I think that's a good thing too. Because you can, as long as you don't give feedback on the assessments, they can be used and the kids can choose their best one. And the nature of science is that you've got biology, chemistry and physics, and I know myself as a biologist, if I tried to do one in physics, it probably wouldn't be as good as my biology one. So to have the opportunity to choose the assessment that you feel more confident in is actually quite cool.
You mentioned there not giving feedback on them. Do you mean in terms of a formal grade? Presumably there are ways that you're giving feedback as the students are going through. And how have you structured that feedback? I see the standard recommends checkpoints.
It is. It's about checkpoints, really.
And isn't that only for if you were doing the student picks, which one to send in?
Absolutely.
You'd give formal feedback on an official one. The reassessment's a whole nother attempt at it.
Yeah, but you could be giving students feedback throughout their learning, presumably?
Just like a normal internal assessment of this style of a report, you do the checkpoints, you check where they should be, that they've not gone way too far off the track type of thing. But as long as you're not marking and giving them the pointed feedback that we're not allowed to give, there's no harm in having a formative and giving feedback back and then giving another couple of opportunities, but not feeding back on those two opportunities. The kids choose the one they want.
And Ange, you were talking about difficulties there in terms of COVID, across the country we're obviously struggling with attendance, and you mentioned the weather as well. Have there been any specific impacts of that for pilot schools that might not have been the same for the rest of the kura across the country?
I'm not sure if it's any different to how other kura have had to deal with it. I think we're all in a pretty crap basket in that regard right now. And I actually think Linda and Chanda have had to deal with it way worse than me. So we've been okay, and actually the flexible nature of these standards has helped me keep sane, because you can just slot something in elsewhere if you need to. It's not like if half your kids are away for your electricity assessment, that practical one you do, and then you're like, crap, what do I do? It's been nice and flexible, but kids missing. I mean, I'm just so grateful that I'm able to do reassessments where I wouldn't have been able to with the current standards. Just my unit of work wouldn't have allowed for it. So it doesn't matter that you were sick for half of that last assessment. You'll just have another go later. Good luck.
That's been the beauty, really, because the absence has been chronic, but because you can actually sort of, it's so flexible, and you're not tied to multiple assessments like you would be in the old system, where this unit of work, this is done, you've done heat, okay, let's go on to metals, let's go on to genetics, and you're moving through and you missed that assessment, 4 credits down, sorry, goodbye. But with this one, because there's only the 2 internals, then you've got the chance to be flexible.
And if sorry, on you go.
Oh, sorry, just with COVID, absences has hit us quite hard. I walked into one year 11 class today, and there were 8 kids out of 20 something. And as a school, one of the things that we've decided to do is to reduce the amount of standards, the amount of credits kids are doing. So in some subjects they're cutting down to 16 from 20 and so forth. But of course, because we're part of the pilot program, we can't cut down, and so we have had to continue. The fact that they are big standards, and you are not being assessed on learning outcomes from day 1 to end of week 10 kind of thing, and an external or something. That means that kids who are away for a few weeks haven't missed out on the sort of specific learning that they then need for an assessment. That there is a possibility still for them to actually catch up on, because we're looking at these broader kind of skills. So that's been good and challenging in some sort of way.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that it's been, those constraints of being a pilot school and not being able to adjust your standards throughout the course of the year is obviously going to be a bit of a hardship for you. But I'm pleased to hear that you've got that flexibility, so that it's not disadvantaging you and your students, hopefully. As you've gone through the process of designing these courses, and you've been through it for 1 year, you're into your second year, what implications have you noticed for junior and senior programs beyond level 1?
Well, we've got to rewrite the juniors. There's a lot to do there to prepare the kids for that. Seniors, it's hard to say because we're going into a new system and we don't know how much of an effect it is the pilots or how much of an effect it was COVID. I mean, we've already taught this year. By the middle of term 2, we had taught more than what we taught for the whole of last year in the level 1 course, just because of the number of lockdowns we had, and it slowed everything up so much. And so that's had an impact on level 2, but that's not necessarily the pilot course that we put together. More of a COVID effect than anything, really, I suppose. But it's going to make a difference to we've got to rewrite. We're already starting to rewrite the junior program completely. Different focus. Yeah.
Yeah, we've also focused on our juniors more. Mataranga Māori is definitely one big component that we've introduced into our Year 9 and our Year 10 programs. The next bit that we're sort of looking at doing is the different types of investigations. We did do classification, but formalizing it a little bit more as an investigation rather than it's a classroom activity kind of thing, and looking at why that's an appropriate way of doing investigation. Our 9s and 10s tended to do good old fair testing much more. But yeah, we need to look at building up the modeling and the classification and the other types of investigations.
Yeah, I renovated my junior curriculum. Didn't have a team to do it with me, but renovated the juniors. It's different, but not massively so. Like, if you wanted to, I feel you could still use, a good old SciPad was the backbone of your course if you desperately wanted. But my seniors, the only difference I've noticed, I've got a gorgeous crop of level 2s this year from the pilot last year. We are doing the validity standard in biology at the moment, and they just get it. I think doing that level 1 standard last year with this one, the socio-scientific one, they just jumped in. They know what they're looking for. They know what they're doing. They know how to write. So they just seem better at that. I don't feel like I had to teach any more of the basics than I normally would in my level 2 course, because I find I have to do a lot of reteaching at level 2 anyway. Kids forget what they had for breakfast, so I'm not surprised they forget basic genetics as well. But 9 and 10, I found a really great excuse in these new standards to just do a fun introduction to science, at year 9, and at year 10 kind of do a science 102 and revisit that and look at good science versus bad science or pseudoscience and just kind of explore some of those skills. It's a change, but it's not massive, and I like what I'm seeing in my level 2s. So good all round. Yay.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're going to go through and kill a whole lot of, more of the content and focus more on science capabilities. They need to be more explicitly taught in the junior school to allow good level 1 stuff. And really and truly, they are the skills they need to take forward. So that's where we're going to go.
Do you have any thoughts about that process and how you'll identify the content that can go versus what you want to keep?
Big ideas and foundations. What do we actually need to know? We also need to think more about the complex system side of things, where we need to start with the big picture and go down to the detail later on. The kids really need the big picture of things first before going into the actual detail of, the 20 elements and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I looked at the curriculum to plan to make sure I cover everything from year 9 all the way through to year 11, because then they might leave after year 11. So just making sure I've covered everything I'm supposed to over those 3 years helped give direction for my planning.
Chanda, you'd mentioned when you were talking about the juniors, Mātauranga Māori, integrating that more into your 9 and 10. Can you tell us any more about how you've done that, or what outcomes you found particularly favourable there?
Right. Yeah. Very doable in biology, which I think we all know. So in year 9 we have a ecosystem unit, so incorporating aspects of a rahui, incorporating aspects around how our plants and animals are named in scientific terms compared to how Māori named it. There are some wonderful resources, Science Learning Hub, and stories around the naming of puta weta weta. These are amazing stories that we are incorporating into this unit. We've got a largely Pacifica cohort, and so a lot of the Mataranga also links with Pacifica community. So talking about rahui to restore a damaged environment, in Rarotongan they call it a raui, and it's pretty much the same kind of thing. So there's strong links with that. When we look at rongoā in Māori context, there's rongoā, it's not called rongoā, but in Samoan culture and in Tongan culture, there's medicinal plants as well. And we've got a little story that we do around a Samoan plant called makalafi, and a scientist has just found that the active ingredient in makalafi is more stronger than brufen, and now they're investigating the medicinal aspects of this traditionally used plants. So I quite like the fact that we start with looking at Mataranga with these strong links to Pacifica as well. In year 10, we do a unit around puberty as part of our pre-genetics work, and so looking at hauora and well-being around the changes, and that's quite a nice one, because we can talk about the physical changes, we can talk about the mental and emotional changes, and the social changes. So biology, I think, is easy. There's lots of opportunities to incorporate these. We are struggling a little bit with the chem and physics. Yeah.
On that note, if people are looking for ideas and resources, I know that the NZASE newsletter produced by the comms team, particularly Mike Stone, feeding into a lot of that. We've been trying to get at least one Mātauranga Māori resource in each newsletter. So if you don't get that, then jump onto NZASE. And it was great to hear the plug for Science Learning Hub there. They've got some really awesome resources in that space. I've got one more question that I just want to touch on, and then I'll hand over to Catherine to ask questions. So if you're watching from the comfort of your own laptop and you've got any questions that you want to feed through in the chat, Catherine has been building those up, and I'll ask some of those in a moment. But last one from me, you've talked a little bit about the assessment, and it sounds like it's a written report. There's been the possibility of maybe doing portfolios and selecting the best one that students want to put forward themselves. Are there any other modes of assessment that have been considered or explored this year?
Go in.
So many. My kids did end up doing a report, but again, we were kind of struck by COVID at the wrong time. I was trying to convince them all to give me videos and do kind of a role play that would capture on video as their socio-scientific report. But yes, no, we're exploring everything. I think the trick is that we have to scaffold our students to find success in something that is not a written report. Because if you give them the option, most kids will go for written report or essay every time, right? So it's just about finding ways of doing it. I know for a different standard we're trialing, I did make them record themselves. I made it a condition of my task, and it was hilarious and really easy to mark. So socio-scientific standard is a little bit more it leans more towards that written side of things, though. So it is what it is. But it's not the only way to do it.
Yeah, they like a slideshow and also a template for a scientific poster. Another way of doing it.
I find it's a lot easier to assess understanding genuinely if the student is giving some sort of presentation or verbal report, whereas the written report is can be prone to plagiarism, I think, and really not being able to assess that true understanding.
For the socio-scientific issue one, I actually found authenticity not to be a really big issue. I mean, aside from if a kid literally copies and pastes something as part of maybe the research, but when it comes to what you assess, which is their science-informed response, like the kids write their perspective and base it on science, and that's really, you can't Google how to do that. You can't steal that from anyone. The kids kind of have to do it. So I found that really easy to manage, and it either makes sense, the coherent sentence from my kid, or it's a disjointed gobbledygook. So I just feel it was really hard to plagiarise on that particular aspect of the standard.
And you can't really plagiarise on the kaitiakitanga aspect either, because you can't Google that. It's just not there.
Thank you all very much for those responses. I'll hand over to Catherine now. And Catherine, you've got some questions for us?
Yeah, kia ora, everyone. So thanks so much for posting several questions. I am going to run through them. I think some of them have been ticked off a little bit. I'll start in reverse order. So one of them was, do you use Turnitin or similar to manage authenticity? And has this been an issue you're concerned with? So we just kind of touched on that. I don't know if you want to add anything more about how you do double check authenticity.
Google Classroom has the plagiarism thing, and that's really good. And it checks now all the work that is in your drive and in the school system as well. So it picks it up real easy, real quick.
I might just add to that one, actually. We had to activate that recently. And for some schools, if you don't see if it's not comparing to other student work within the school, there is an option that your admin might have to turn on to allow that to happen. Although when I've tested it, I put in 2 identical reports and checked it, and it was only about 49% similar, which was strange, but it was enough to flag up that I needed to do a bit more investigating there. Sorry, Chanda, over to you.
I was going to talk about the comparison of 2 students' work, and I really like that aspect of the Google Classroom. Yeah, it's really useful.
Okay.
I clearly didn't have any issues with it, but I think milestones really help with that too. Just keeping an eye on what your kids are doing, but that is really hard when you have heaps of kids. Good luck.
Okay, great. So we had another question. As the new standards are so flexible, would there be a bias towards the teacher's favorite subject, so there could be a probability that students are not properly prepared for level 2 specialization?
Not in my team. The physicists won't let us away with it.
Isn't it the same as with the current standards? Like a teacher could select the standards that they favour already. I think it's much of a muchness. You teach what you want to teach, and teachers that are looking for balance will find balance, and those that just want to teach their favourites will only teach their favourites. I don't think it's any different.
Okay. Next question. Can the standard be reassessed or added to and then reassessed level 2 and 3 so it grows as a portfolio if it means the standards for other socio-scientific standards, and for example 91602 in bio or space science 911411?
We don't
think
really
we can comment on that.
What's in level 2, I mean, it's not going to be a translation of what we've got already. So yeah, I don't know. And really, if there was a socio-scientific at each of the 3 levels, as a teacher, would I be doing the same context every year? Most probably not.
Be boring.
And there's so much more, especially in biology. So why would you limit it to one thing?
Okay. This one might be an easier question. If you are taking 3 weeks for the assessment, how long is the unit in total?
So we took the all of term 2 as our learning, because we did cover a certain amount of biology around digestion and glucose getting into cells and get that kind of stuff. So we did do a bit of biology. The other thing that we are doing this term is we are teaching one of the externals, the 1.4, at the same time. So that's been a really, really good thing, because the 1.4 is about the validity of scientific claims. And when you're talking about diet and exercise, there's a lot of good resources to look at validity of scientific claims. So that's been quite good. Our sort of challenge there has been making sure that kids actually understand that we are working on a different standard. It's been a small issue. So yeah, for 10 weeks, we weren't running 1.4, in big chunks. We're sort of doing odd lessons towards 1.4, and we're going to step that up a little bit more as we get closer to the actual submission date for 1.4.
Ours is part of an overarching topic of Te Taiao, and we're sort of looking at our local area, and one little section of that is the Biosphere. We're putting it under the Biospheres, and so this is the Biosphere aspect that we're looking at. We'll be looking at we've already looked at the geosphere, atmosphere, climate change type thing, and we're going into the hydrosphere, and so it's under an overarching topic, and it's one small section. And we'll be, we're teaching the investigations and the validity all at the same time, off and on, jumping in and out. So we've color coded our different assessments so they know what they're doing.
That's great. One of the other questions kind of links in, because they're asking about evaluation of sources for validity and reliability bias, or the use of scientific journals or articles as opposed to newspapers, flyers, and social media. So how did you kind of balance that with students?
I think that learning it fits better under the learning for 1.4. I certainly touched on it during my kaitiakitanga unit, which was only supposed to be learning, like it was supposed to be a 3-week unit and then a 3-week kind of learning assessment. Didn't work out that way, but whatever. But I'm finding that validity stuff fits much more naturally in a unit around that. So you can give it the time it needs. But that's just what I'm doing.
Great, thank you. Another individual has said, as a health professional, they're wondering how much integration between biochem and physics is possible in this standard. I think maybe you touched a little bit on that when you were talking about 1080.
Our first whole half of the year was based around Mrs. Gren and energy, and we looked at energy transformations and how energy was obtained and used in the body. So we looked at the energy that was in the chemical bonding, and so it was a complete mishmash of biochem and phys all mixed in together. And we just moved through, followed energy from the time we took it into the time we used it, basically, ending with mechanics.
Cool.
I think you could mishmash them quite a bit. How talented are you as a teacher?
Yeah, the physics bit went down a bit for me, but anyway.
Okay. Great, thank you for that. Are the students generally taking a position on the issue, or are they thinking about action, and what sort of actions are working or not working?
They are taking a position on the issue. So, for us, we're looking at basically, is diet contributing, or is physical activity or lack of contributing to these health issues? And, a good student will talk about the fact that you basically both are contributing to the issue, or they might take one perspective. So they have to take a action, or they can come up with an action to address the issue. And I quite like the flexibility here. It could be supporting something that's already happening, or something that people might be campaigning for. But the key thing is that they need to back it up with the science evidence, the science-informed component, as far as the action goes. Response, sorry, I think it's called on the standard, not action.
Yeah, it's a response. And also they have to relate it to kaitiakitanga and why it is a good response.
Right.
Yeah, my students definitely just took responses and suggested actions rather than taking actions for 1080. That makes sense, I suppose.
And is it structured in your classes that they're all working on the same issue, or do they have flexibility? They could each kind of work on their own issue as long as it fit within what you've defined as a local issue?
We've got ours giving a true choice of 3, and they can come up with another one if they want, because it's inquiry-based rather than content-based.
Yeah, mine had an overarching issue, and then the students wrote a question, like a research question, to answer about an aspect of that issue, and every kid had their own question. So slightly different things, but under the same umbrella.
So it would probably lend quite well to differentiation for some of your lower and your higher ability kids. That's great. Sorry, Chanda, I cut you off there.
No. You got me thinking now. I first think that initially thought that maybe ours is quite directed and narrow, although they can actually look at different science responses within diet and physical activity. So, they could be looking at sugar tax, or they could be looking at changing diet so they get more green vegetables into their diet or something, or another aspect of diet, portion size or something like that. So, it got me thinking about that one, whether it is quite narrow. And I think it's a little bit more narrow than what you guys are doing, or more directed as far as what the other two are doing. Yeah.
Cool. And I just had one last question from myself, is if you ever get student voice or community voice coming up with some of those bigger issues in the community. I mean, sometimes if you're only on your own, one teacher in a school, coming up with these ideas can be challenging. So if you seek advice from others, because you never know what you're going to get, actually.
You talk to the kids.
Yeah, you talk to the kids. They're great. And I think seeking formal feedback from the community would be awesome. But you're right, it is really hard when you're on your own. Talk to the kids. They're great. They're full of ideas.
Although when you get advice from the community, you've got to insist that it's science-informed advice, right?
Yes, absolutely. If there's any more questions, just pop them through on the YouTube chat, but I don't have any other ones coming through.
That's perfect timing, Catherine, actually. I think we were aiming for an hour. And so we'll wrap up there. But if there are, if other questions do come through, we'll certainly aim to answer those, separately, perhaps on the comment section. It just falls to me then to say a massive thank you to Linda, Ange, and Chanda, not only for coming on tonight and sort of sharing your learning with the rest of the science community across New Zealand, but also for taking that challenge for you and for your teams. There's been, I suppose you're now well into the second year of that, and it's been really great to hear from you. And so thank you, Kapai, for all the hard mahi that you've been doing. Thank you also, Catherine, for coming on board and managing those questions. Really appreciate that. And if you have a look in the comments or in the description of the video, I think I've put in the links there to some of the standard related stuff that you probably already know how to get to, but also the links for the upcoming webinars throughout the course of the year, where we'll be speaking to some of the pilot schools again, and we'll see some of these familiar faces and some others as well on standards 1.2, 1.3 and 1.4. So with Matariki coming up this weekend, I hope you all have a fantastic time. Ngā mihi o Matariki te taho Māori. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Ka kite.
Thank you.
Bye.